It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day where the sky feels too heavy to hold itself up. I had just gotten home from work, shaking off my umbrella at the door, when my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. It was from a mutual friend, someone I didn't speak to often, but the words on the screen made my chest tighten instantly. "You should see this." There was a link attached, and, against my better judgment, I clicked it. The page that loaded wasn't some random article or video. It was a screenshot, my name, my face, my private life, plastered across a group chat I didn't even know existed. I scrolled through, my stomach twisting with each message. Lies. Rumors. Personal details only one person could have known. And there she was, my best friend of 8 years, typing things about me I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The more I read, the colder I felt. I sat there in silence, the rain hammering against my window like it was trying to get in. My mind kept flicking through memories, late-night talks over coffee, the way she stood up for me in front of others, the birthday surprises, the secrets we promised to take to the grave. I had believed, without a shred of doubt, that she was the one person who had my back no matter what. And yet here was the proof, in cruel black and white text, that she had been tearing me down behind my back for who knows how long. I tried to think of an explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe someone had hacked her account, maybe, just maybe, there was something I didn't know. But deep down, my gut knew the truth. The little things I had ignored over the years began to resurface. The way she sometimes twisted my words, the times she conveniently forgot to tell me about events until the last minute, the smug smile when something bad happened to me. I had called them quirks of her personality, even joked about them. Now they formed a pattern I couldn't unsee. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in waves, each stronger than the last. The first was shock, the kind that makes your hand shake. Then came the sadness, an ache that settled deep in my chest. And finally, the anger, hot, unrelenting, almost blinding. I wanted to confront her immediately, to demand why, to shout and cry, and make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But something in me resisted. If she had been playing this game in secret for years, then she was already prepared for a fight. I decided to wait. I needed to see just how deep the knife had gone. Over the next few days, I started paying attention. I noticed how she would ask oddly specific questions about my plans, how she would linger near conversations she wasn't part of. I realized she wasn't just my friend. She had been collecting information, little pieces of my life, to use at her convenience. And all that time I had thought she was just being a good listener. The worst part wasn't even what she had said. It was the performance, the way she'd still text me in the morning, asking how I was, or send me memes to make me laugh. Knowing she could smile in my face after gutting me behind my back made my skin crawl. The day I finally cut her off, I didn't tell her why. I didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing how much she had hurt me. I simply stopped answering. Her calls went to voicemail, her texts unread. She showed up at my door once, pounding until the neighbors noticed. But I stayed silent inside, watching her through the peephole. And then, just like that, she was gone. Months later, I heard from others that she had tried to spin a story about me, painting herself as the victim. I didn't bother defending myself. Those who mattered already knew the truth, and the rest weren't worth my breath. What I did learn, though, was that losing a friend like that is both the worst and best thing that can happen. The worst, because you feel foolish for ever trusting them. The best, because it frees you from the quiet poison they've been slipping into your life. The day I found out my best friend was my worst enemy was the day I finally understood. Sometimes betrayal isn't a single stab in the back. Sometimes it's 1,000 small cuts you never noticed until you're bleeding out. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The weeks after cutting her off felt strange, like learning to live in a house where all the furniture had been rearranged. I kept catching myself wanting to send her a funny picture or to call her when something good happened. That muscle memory of friendship was hard to break. But every time I almost reached for my phone, I would remember those screenshots, those smirking words written by someone who was supposed to love me like family. And just like that, my hand would fall back to my side. It wasn't just her absence I had to deal with, it was the rewiring of my mind. I started second-guessing everyone's intentions. If she could wear a mask so convincingly for 8 years, how many others could be hiding behind smiles? I caught myself studying people's tones, reading between lines of casual conversation, looking for shadows in their words. I hated it, hated the paranoia, but it was like I couldn't help it. I ran into her once, months later, at a cafe. She was sitting by the window, laughing at something the man across from her had said. For a moment, my chest tightened, that old reflex urging me to wave, to smile, to pretend nothing had happened. But then she looked up, and our eyes met. There was no surprise in her face, only a flicker of something sharp and calculating before the mask of friendliness slid back on. She gave me a small, almost mocking smile. I didn't smile back. I walked past her table without a word, feeling her gaze follow me until I was out the door. It was in that moment I understood. She had probably never felt guilty. People like her rarely do. The betrayal hadn't been a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It had been deliberate, sustained, and part of who she was. And you can't change that in someone. Over time, I started to see the ways she had been holding me back. How she had subtly undermined my confidence, planting seeds of doubt in my head, so she could be the one I leaned on. How she had distanced me from certain people, perhaps because she feared they'd see through her sooner. Without her in my life, I began reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned, and saying yes to opportunities I'd once felt unworthy of. I didn't erase her from my memory. I'm not sure you can truly erase someone who once meant that much. But I stopped letting the pain she caused define me. Instead, I let it sharpen me, make me more careful with my trust, more aware of the quiet ways people show who they really are. The day I found out my best friend was my worst enemy was brutal. But it was also the day I stopped mistaking closeness for loyalty. I learned that real friends don't just stand beside you when the sun is shining. They guard your name in the dark. And once I knew the difference, I promised myself I would never again settle for less. The slow burn of betrayal doesn't end when the person is gone. It lingers like smoke in your lungs, an invisible weight you keep trying to cough out. In the months that followed, little reminders would surface, uninvited. A necklace she once gave me lay forgotten in a drawer, tangled with old receipts and spare buttons. A playlist she'd made for me years ago popped up on shuffle one afternoon, the first notes hitting like a punch to the gut. Even certain streets became traps. I'd catch myself crossing the road just to avoid walking past the cafe where we used to sit for hours. But the strangest thing was how often I caught her ghost in my own thoughts. I would think of something funny, then instinctively imagine her reaction before remembering she wasn't there anymore, and that she had never really been there to begin with. It was as though my brain still wanted to run everything past her, even after knowing the truth. That was the part one hated the most, realizing how deeply I had let her into the architecture of my life, and how much work it would take to rebuild without her. I started piecing together more signs I had missed. The time I confided in her about a fight I'd had with a relative, and days later, someone I barely knew brought it up in conversation. The way she once accidentally texted me a message meant for someone else, mocking my recent breakup. How she always seemed oddly cheerful whenever something in my life went wrong, covering it with just enough fake concern to seem believable. One night, I found myself rereading old messages between us. At first, it was painful nostalgia, photos from trips we'd taken, inside jokes that had once felt like our secret language. But as I scrolled, I noticed things I'd been too blind to see before. Her compliments were always laced with backhanded edges. Her advice often steered me toward decisions that benefited her more than me. And in the moments when I had been at my lowest, her responses were flat, measured, almost as if she had been taking notes rather than offering comfort. That realization hit harder than the screenshots ever had. It wasn't just that she had betrayed me, it was that she had studied me, learned my weaknesses, my fears, my desires, and then weaponized them when it suited her. The final nail in the coffin came when another mutual friend, one I trusted, quietly told me that my ex-best friend had been the one to spread the rumor that nearly cost me my job 2 years earlier. At the time, I'd been desperate to find out who had done it, and she had been the first to offer comfort, swearing she'd fight for me if I needed. Now I knew the truth. She had been playing both roles all along, the villain and the savior, making herself indispensable by creating the very fires she pretended to put out. Oddly enough, that knowledge brought me a strange sense of peace. I realized there had been no real friendship to lose. What I'd been mourning all this time was an illusion, a mask she had worn so well that I'd mistaken it for a face. And so, slowly, I let her ghost fade. I boxed up the reminders, deleted the playlists, and stopped revisiting old messages. I built new friendships, cautiously but with intention, with people whose loyalty wasn't conditional. And while I still keep my guard higher than before, I no longer let the memory of her dictate how I live. Because the day I found out my best friend was my worst enemy wasn't just the day I lost someone, it was the day I learned to finally protect myself. And if there's one thing I know for certain now, it's that no mask stays on forever. The truth always finds a way to slip through the cracks.